Chapter 14. After a few hours of restless sleep, Steve was awake for the day at a regrettably early hour. It was only 5 a.m. and he'd already been up for half an hour. They'd been right about the jet lag. His body had not been consulted on the decision to go transatlantic. But there was at least a decent coffee machine in the room, proper filter stuff, not the horrible Nescafe sachets he was used to in the hotels they used on tour in England. Even the Hiltons he stayed in served that instant dross, and they were all missing a trick as this new stuff was great. He flicked on the TV, traffic news, onto weather news, and more traffic news. How much traffic was there to report at 5 in the morning? And had the weather forecast changed so much in the last 10 minutes that they needed to go through it again? The broadcast was without any merit. Their channel finally switched to some other content, largely of Bill Clinton waving before some depressing archive footage of Princess Diana, who had suddenly died a few weeks before. Americans had wholeheartedly adopted the grief of the British in the absence of their own historical institution, whose drama they could lament. The newsreels continued to run footage of emotional New Yorkers reflecting on their own memories of somebody they had never met and who knew nothing about her other than what they were fed by people with a news cycle to fill. Beyond that, there was no international news despite the US having active military engagements all over the world with the UN and NATO. There was nothing to educate or even inform America about what was going on in the world. The TV was a procession of mindlessness, and Steve switched it off, training his mildly hungover stare out of the window, quietly absorbing the early autumn Manhattan morning. With hours to kill before his meeting, he reviewed the week's plan of action. The first meeting was with Jared, the man on the ground in New York that Tina had told him to work with from the off. They were having breakfast in the Hilton's restaurant at 8:30. Looking at the detail within his diary, he cast a first glance over the arrangements for the meeting, and the sudden realization that it was not scheduled to be at this Hilton but at a completely different one located miles away down near Wall Street. Who sorted that out? Looking out the window once more, Steve now understood why there seemed to be travel updates on the TV every other minute. The streets had suddenly jammed with the delivery lorries that provided the fuel to feed and water the millions of New Yorkers, and the taxis and the limos which ferried the early risers to where they needed to be. Given his early rising, Steve could use the time to walk through his first New York morning rather than join the traffic or metro. It was a beautiful, clear day. The sun was already in the sky, and a warm breeze drifted up along the east coast from the Caribbean. He showered and made himself presentable before starting the 4-mile walk to the sister Hilton at the foot of the island. The smells of falafel and burrito from the night before were replaced with the morning vendors serving up egg white omelets and coffee, the fuel that would generate much of the manic energy that would quickly overtake the city's streets. At this time of the morning, the streets were comparatively sedate, a collection of regulars exchanging pleasantries with the same vendors 5 mornings a week, in the way creatures of habit visit and then ponder around their favoured watering holes the world over. But the streets were becoming more hectic by the minute. As he wandered south, his pathway through some of the world's most famous towers was hampered by the heightened need for awareness to avoid collision with fellow pedestrians, all of whom were trying their best to avoid the human traffic that seemed to follow no recognizable set of rules. This was in addition to the cyclists who viewed everybody else with spit-filled hatred. There was no time for anyone else's welfare, a far cry from the more relaxed walk of the previous evening. On these streets, it was clearly a game of survival of the fittest. New York continued its speedy migration into its daytime persona, but once beyond the Empire State Building it seemed to ease off. Union Square Park had a much more relaxed feel before his path took him through the village and up to the restaurant he'd enjoyed with Isla last night, and with Steve now more comfortable with the route he was taking, he started to reflect on the night before, and Isla. Although she was only 19 years old, they had signed up to be friends. It had been a really fun evening, and not for the first time, Steve reminded himself just how gorgeous and funny he felt her, and how she was a huge case of wow. But although nothing had happened between them, so much seemed to have happened. Caught in his own mind, he realised that he was looking the wrong way for oncoming traffic and stepped into the road. A loud beep woke Steve up, and he jumped back onto the path before any harm was inflicted. Walk down to Wall Street was accompanied by the street types, yelling into their phones, supported with body language suggesting important work. Steve quickly surmised that it also acted as a disguise for impotence at home. This was an ugly place, not architecturally, just spiritually. It was Avalon for people who came from all over the world to work here, but these were not his people. He hoped Jared was a good guy to work with, not like all these wankers. He'd been told that they had met once when he was over to meet Tina, but he couldn't remember him. Tina did not suffer fools. She'd told him Jared was one of them, and what Tina said, especially about things on this trip, was the Bible.